the universe had been under the heel of the Galactic Tyrants for eons. Powerful empires, dominated by ancient and oppressive alien races, ruled vast swathes of the galaxy. Entire worlds had been enslaved, their populations broken and subjugated. Yet, in the darkest corners of the galaxy, whispers of defiance stirred. Among the oppressed, there was one race that would not bow down. One race that had fought and survived when the odds were insurmountable. Humanity. It began on Earth, in the aftermath of the Great Uprising, when the last remnants of humanity's military resistance had been crushed by the alien coalition. Earth had been devastated, its cities reduced to rubble, its once proud civilization now a forgotten relic. But the humans, unlike any species the tyrants had ever faced, were not easily vanquished. They did not surrender. They endured. And now, they were ready. On a small, barely functioning outpost on the outskirts of the Andromeda sector, Commander Sarah Elston stared at the holoscreen. Her eyes burned with fierce determination as she studied the coordinates of the Galactic Tyrants' next target, a planet known as Thalmar. A world rich in resources, strategically vital to the Tyrants' war machine. It was about to be destroyed, its inhabitants enslaved for another century of servitude. This would not be allowed to happen. Not while she was alive. "Prepare the fleet," Sarah ordered, her voice low but resolute. "We're going to take the fight to them." Her crew, a ragtag group of human survivors and former rebels, responded with unwavering loyalty. They had fought tooth and nail for the right to be free, and now they would take the fight directly to the empire that had oppressed them for far too long. The Galactic Tyrants had made one fatal mistake: they had underestimated humanity. The humans were not just fighters. They were survivors, thinkers, and innovators. Sarah stood before the war table, her eyes narrowing as she reviewed the battle plans. The Tyrants had the numbers, the technology, and the firepower. But they lacked one thing: the relentless spirit of a species that had fought against impossible odds throughout its history. The Tyrants had never known what it was like to face an enemy who would not bend. "We've got a shot at this," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "If we hit them hard and fast, we can destabilize their control in this sector. Thalmar will be the first step. We'll take their flagship next. Once we've crippled their fleets, we'll spread the rebellion throughout the galaxy." A low murmur of approval rippled through the room. The human fighters, though battered, had learned from their many years of struggle. They had fought off alien warlords, destroyed countless enemy outposts, and rallied countless oppressed races to their cause. The idea of taking the fight directly to the Tyrants was a bold one, but it was the only way forward. It was the moment they had all been waiting for. As Sarah reviewed the final details of the mission, her mind wandered back to the early days of the war. She remembered the cries of her fallen comrades, the bloodshed, and the destruction of Earth itself. But those memories, painful as they were, only fueled her resolve. They had lost so much, but they had gained something invaluable: the will to fight back. And now, the time had come to show the Tyrants the true strength of humanity. "All systems ready for launch, Commander," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice steady. Sarah turned and nodded, her hand clenching into a fist. "Let's show them what humanity can do." As the human fleet, consisting of a motley collection of salvaged ships, fighter craft, and makeshift war machines, prepared to make the jump into the heart of the Tyrant's empire, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. For the first time in years, the oppressive darkness that had threatened to swallow them all felt just a little bit smaller. The day humanity took the fight to the Galactic Tyrants would go down in history. The universe would never forget what was coming. And no matter how large or powerful the Tyrants seemed, they had underestimated the true power of humanity. The fight was just beginning. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Thalmar system. A cold silence settled over the bridge of Sarah's flagship, the Phoenix. This was it, the moment they had all been preparing for. The Tyrants' fleet was several light-years away, their focus on other sectors, but Thalmar was the jewel in their crown. If they could take this planet back from the grip of the Tyrants, it would send shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Sarah stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the screen as it displayed the planet's orbital defenses. The Tyrants had underestimated humanity before, but now, they were going to learn that even the smallest of rebellions could tip the scales. "Status report," Sarah commanded. "We've got a fleet of 500 warships in orbit," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice tense. "They're armed to the teeth with laser cannons and energy shields. We'll need to disable their shields to make a dent." The rest of the crew was already at their stations, preparing the weapons and systems for their assault. Sarah's hand rested lightly on the control panel, her mind running over the strategy once more. It was a long shot, but they had one advantage, the element of surprise. "Prepare the EMPs," Sarah ordered, "we're going to hit them hard and fast. The EMPs will take out their shields for a few minutes. That's our window." "Understood," Harris replied, before issuing the order to load the electromagnetic pulse devices. The crew moved with practiced precision, their movements fluid and quick. As Sarah looked at the planet on the display, a sharp pang of guilt tugged at her heart. Thalmar wasn't just a strategic target. It was home to millions, thousands of innocent lives who would suffer in the aftermath of this assault. But the alternative, letting the Tyrants continue their rule, would be far worse. The humans were not here to destroy, they were here to liberate. "ETA to Thalmar orbit, 2 minutes, Lieutenant Harris reported, breaking Sarah from her thoughts. "Ready to launch EMPs on your command." Sarah took a deep breath, her hand tightening on the armrest. This was the moment. There would be no turning back after this. "Launch EMPs," she ordered. The shockwave of the pulse spread across the system, and for a moment, everything went silent. The vast flotilla of enemy ships seemed to shudder as their shields flickered and sputtered, momentarily rendered useless. "Now, strike fast." Sarah's voice rang out, her heart pounding as she barked the orders. "Launch fighters. Target their command ships, but avoid civilian areas. We're here to cripple their war machine, not slaughter innocent lives." Hundreds of human fighter ships, modified versions of their old Earth aircraft, screamed toward the Tyrant fleet. They were small, fast, and deadly, armed with plasma missiles and high-caliber laser guns. The human pilots were veterans of countless skirmishes, their skills honed by years of guerrilla warfare. They were ready for this moment. The Tyrant fleet reacted swiftly, but it was too late. Human pilots dove in and out of enemy fire, using their agility and speed to their advantage. The first of the enemy's command ships exploded into a massive fireball, taking down dozens of smaller ships in the process. The remaining Tyrant vessels scrambled to reorganize, but their shields were still down, their communications were scrambled, and their defensive systems were in disarray. "We've got a clear shot at the enemy flagship," Harris said, his voice tinged with awe. "Should we take it out?" Sarah's gaze never wavered from the unfolding battle. She knew what the fall of their flagship would mean. It would disrupt the entire enemy command structure and strike terror into the heart of the Empire. "Do it," she said, her voice steady but full of resolve. The human fighters descended on the massive warship with terrifying precision. Plasma blasts collided with the flagship's vulnerable hull, tearing it apart piece by piece. Within minutes, the flagship was nothing more than a smoldering wreck floating in the debris of the battle. "We've got their attention now," Sarah said with a grim smile. "Now, we show them what happens when you mess with humanity." The battle raged on. Human ships tore through the Tyrants' lines, cutting through their defenses with surgical strikes. Despite the odds, despite being vastly outnumbered, the humans fought with a fury that the Galactic Tyrants had never experienced before. And in the chaos, the humans' message was clear: the days of oppression were over. They were coming for every tyrant who thought they could rule the stars unchallenged. The battle above Thalmar had taken an unexpected turn. What began as a desperate gamble had transformed into a stunning success. The Tyrants' fleet, still reeling from the human assault, struggled to regroup. Their command structure was in disarray, their ships were crippled, and their morale shattered. The humans, though outnumbered and outgunned, had struck a blow that none of the Galactic Tyrants had expected. Sarah stood at the helm of the Phoenix, her heart racing as she watched the last of the enemy ships fall into the void. The debris field from the destroyed flagship lit up the space around them, a testament to the power of humanity's resolve. The victory was theirs, but it was only the beginning. "We did it," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice thick with disbelief. "We actually did it." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the transmissions coming in from Thalmar's surface. She had expected some form of communication from the planet's leadership, but what she saw sent a jolt through her chest. The message wasn't from a human survivor, it was from the Thalmar natives, who were watching the battle unfold from below. They were cheering. "Commander Elston," a voice crackled through the comms. It was the leader of the Thalmar resistance, a tall, broad-shouldered alien with silvery skin. "You've done it. You've freed us. The tyrants are no more." Sarah's eyes narrowed in confusion. "I thought you were under the tyrants' rule." How do you know?" The Thalmar leader chuckled, though it sounded like the noise was more out of disbelief than joy. "For years, we've been watching your ships in the distance. We heard whispers. We saw the signs of human resistance spreading across the galaxy. Your name is known, Commander Elston. You and your people have inspired us." For a moment, Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't realized how far the reach of humanity's struggle had extended. They were no longer fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for something much greater. Their victories had sparked the fire of rebellion in others who had lived under the crushing yoke of tyranny for centuries. Sarah took a deep breath and steadied herself. "It's not over," she said, her voice steady but full of resolve. "We'll need your help. The tyrants still have fleets across the galaxy. We've made a dent, but the war has just begun." The Thalmar leader's voice came through once more, this time with fire. "We will join you, Commander. We will fight. You are not alone." The transmission ended, but the feeling of hope lingered. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. They had allies. Several days later, Sarah stood before a crowded conference room aboard the Phoenix. Representatives from various resistance groups now filled the room, their faces a mixture of war-weary but determined. The galaxy's oppressed had heard the message loud and clear: humanity was rising. And the galaxy would rise with them. "We've made contact with dozens of systems," Harris said as he paced in front of a large galactic map. "The rebellion is spreading faster than we anticipated. Systems are falling one by one as their oppressors flee. The tyrants are losing control." "Good," Sarah said, her eyes narrowing with determination. "But it's not enough. We can't let them regroup. We need to hit them harder, faster, before they can consolidate power. We've got reports of multiple tyrant fleets assembling at the Cathar Nebula," Lieutenant Harris continued. "That's their last major stronghold in this sector. If we take it, we could deal a crippling blow to their operations here." Sarah tapped her fingers on the table. "The nebula is dense, with pockets of electromagnetic interference. It's a dangerous place for a direct assault. We'll need to rely on stealth and precision strikes." A representative from the Zalari resistance, a reptilian species with golden scales, spoke up. "We have ships that can navigate the nebula. We'll help you get in undetected. But we need more firepower if we're to take down the tyrant's flagship there." "Then we'll give it to you," Sarah said, locking eyes with him. "We'll bring everything we've got. No more playing around. We take the Cathar Nebula, we cripple their power, and we send a message to the rest of the galaxy: this is only the beginning." The room erupted in a chorus of agreement. Humanity had sparked something unstoppable. The galaxy was beginning to rise, and the tyrants would soon learn that they could no longer control the stars. As the crew of the Phoenix prepared for their next strike, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something enormous. The first victory had been the spark. Now, it was time for the galaxy to burn. The Cathar Nebula loomed ahead, a swirling mass of gas and dust that hid untold dangers. Its electromagnetic interference was so intense that even the most advanced sensor systems could barely penetrate its dense fog. To the Galactic Tyrants, it was a safe haven, a place where they could regroup and plan their next moves without fear of detection. But to Sarah Elston and her growing rebellion, the Cathar Nebula would be the place where everything changed. The human fleet, bolstered by their new allies from Thalmar and other worlds, approached the nebula in silence. The engines of their ships hummed softly, almost as though they were afraid to disturb the fragile peace that hung in the air. They had made it this far, but now the real test would begin. "All ships are in position, Commander," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice a mixture of focus and anticipation. "We're ready to proceed with the stealth approach." "Good," Sarah said, her gaze fixed on the swirling nebula ahead. "We can't afford to make any noise. We need to get as close to their fleet as possible before we strike." The plan was simple. The rebels would use their stealth technology to slip into the nebula undetected, then launch a series of surprise attacks on the Tyrants' ships. The element of surprise was their greatest weapon, but they knew the risks. One mistake, one slip-up, and the whole mission could go south. "We've got the Zalari ships on our side for this one," Harris continued, pointing to the holographic map in front of them. "They'll guide us through the electromagnetic interference and give us a clearer picture of the enemy's positions." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. The stakes were higher than ever. The Tyrants had no idea what was coming, and Sarah couldn't afford to waste this chance. If they took down the fleet at Cathar, it would cripple the Tyrants' ability to control this sector of the galaxy. It was the kind of blow they needed to ensure the rebellion's survival. "Let's do this," Sarah said, her voice calm but filled with the fire of conviction. "We move out now." The fleet plunged into the nebula, the ship's engines powering down to minimize their signatures. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional crackling of static from the comms. The vast expanse of swirling gas and dust seemed to close in on them, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Sarah's eyes scanned the flickering sensor readouts, trying to make sense of the confusing data. The nebula's electromagnetic fields played havoc with their instruments, but the Zalari navigators seemed to know exactly where they were going. Their ships, adapted to the nebula's unique conditions, led the way through the dense clouds of ionized gas, guiding the human fleet deeper into the heart of the enemy stronghold. Then, without warning, the first of the Tyrant ships appeared. It was massive, a hulking warship with a dark hull that seemed to absorb the light around it. It floated silently, almost camouflaged by the nebula, unaware that a small fleet of rebels was just a few kilometers away. "Target locked," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice tight with anticipation. "Ready to fire on your command." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The moment they had trained for. Take the shot. The first volley of plasma missiles erupted from the Phoenix and the Allied ships, streaking through the nebula like fiery comets. The Tyrant ship was caught off guard, its shields flickering before they collapsed under the assault. Explosions erupted on its surface, sending debris tumbling into the void. The element of surprise worked, at least for now. But Sarah knew the clock was ticking. The Tyrants would respond quickly, and their retaliation would be swift and merciless. She had no time to waste. "All ships, follow my lead," Sarah ordered. "We hit them hard and fast. We can't let them regroup." The fleet surged forward, breaking through the nebula's cover and engaging the enemy head-on. Explosions rocked the space around them as the two forces collided in a blaze of fire and chaos. The human fighters, agile and quick, darted in and out of the fight, hitting enemy ships with pinpoint precision before retreating into the nebula's dense clouds. The Tyrants, slow and lumbering by comparison, struggled to adapt to the unexpected assault. But the Tyrants were not unprepared. Despite the initial shock, their warships quickly began to retaliate, launching counterattacks with devastating force. The first wave of human fighters began to fall, their ships torn apart by the heavy fire of the enemy. "We're taking heavy losses," Lieutenant Harris called out. "We need reinforcements." Sarah gritted her teeth. She had known the risks, but seeing her crew fight and fall in the blink of an eye stung deep. "Hold the line," she shouted. "We have to keep pushing forward." This is our chance. Just then, a bright flash illuminated the nebula as one of the Tyrant flagships unleashed a devastating barrage of energy blasts. The shockwave sent ripples through the fleet, knocking several ships off course. The Phoenix shuddered as a near miss tore through its shields. "Damage report," Sarah barked. "Shields holding, but we've lost power to the aft thrusters," came the response. "We're drifting. Can you still fight?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. "We can fight, Commander," the chief engineer replied. "But we need to keep moving." Sarah's gaze sharpened. The tide of battle was turning. The human fleet was being pushed back, but they were not out yet. Not by a long shot. "Then let's make them regret underestimating us," Sarah said through gritted teeth. The rebellion was far from over. But today, humanity had proven that even in the heart of the Cathar Nebula, they could make their enemies tremble. The battle in the Cathar Nebula raged on, chaos filling the void between the ships as explosions cracked the silence of space. The human fleet was battered but not broken. The Phoenix, though drifting, still held its ground, its crew fighting with relentless determination. Each blast, each maneuver, each life lost had a purpose: freedom. "Commander, we've taken out most of their smaller ships," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice strained but hopeful. "But the flagship is still intact and heavily shielded. We can't get through to it with what we've got left." Sarah's knuckles whitened on the command chair's armrests. The flagship of the Tyrants was the heart of their fleet, and until it fell, the rebellion would not be safe. They had done well to hit the Tyrants hard in this sector, but it wasn't enough. "Not yet. We've got one more chance," Sarah muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "We'll need to focus everything on the flagship. No more distractions." But as she scanned the carnage unfolding on the view screen, something gnawed at her. Humanity had taken the fight to the Tyrants, yes. But at what cost? The losses were mounting, ships reduced to floating debris, crews lost in flashes of light. Her heart ached for every sacrifice, but she knew that each battle was a step closer to freedom. The war would not be won without pain. "We can still do this," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Every ship left standing is a testament to our resolve. We push forward. We make them regret every moment they've spent trying to crush us." As she spoke, a chilling transmission cut through the chaos, a communication from the Tyrant's flagship. "This is Admiral Core of the Galactus Dominion," the voice crackled, full of venom. "You may have crippled my fleet, but this is where your rebellion ends. You are nothing but insects, struggling against the tide. You will die here, and your names will be forgotten." The audacity of the Admiral's words stirred a surge of anger in Sarah, but there was something else too, something colder, something that came with knowing this war was far from over. The Tyrants would not fall easily, and the price of their defeat would be steep. "This is where we show them what humanity is made of," she said firmly, rallying her crew. "Lieutenant, lock onto their flagship's main reactor. We'll hit them with everything we've got left. If we take out that core, the whole fleet goes down with it." "Locked on, Commander," Harris confirmed. "Weapons ready." The human ships gathered together in formation, preparing to strike in unison. Despite the odds, despite the heavy losses, the remaining fleet was determined. Even as fires burned across the Phoenix and other ships in the line, the human forces maintained discipline. This was their moment. The flagship had been weakened by their previous attacks, but it still loomed large in the nebula, an impenetrable fortress of metal and energy. "Initiate the attack," Sarah commanded. A concentrated barrage of plasma fire and missiles poured toward the flagship. The explosion of weapons was deafening as the human ships poured every last ounce of their firepower into the heart of the Tyrant's remaining force. The flagship's shields flared once more, holding for a heartbeat longer than Sarah had hoped. But it wasn't enough. The concentrated fire from the human fleet pierced the shields. The first explosion tore through the outer hull of the Tyrant ship. Seconds later, another blast cracked its central core. Then came the final explosion, a massive eruption that shook the entire nebula. The flagship was consumed by fire, its once mighty frame reduced to a disintegrating wreck. "Direct hit!" Harris shouted. "They're done. The flagship's gone." The human fleet erupted in cheers. It was a victory. But as Sarah watched the tyrant ships begin to retreat, she couldn't shake the feeling of loss. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. But one of the tyrant's greatest weapons had been neutralized. The tide had turned. "We've won the day," Sarah said, as she surveyed the remaining fleet on the view screen. "It was a bittersweet victory. But we've paid a high price." Harris turned to face her. "Commander, we've done the impossible. The tyrants won't know what hit them." Sarah nodded slowly. "And the galaxy is waking up. This victory will send ripples across the stars. But we're not done. We can't stop now." As the fleet regrouped, Sarah turned to the next stage of the rebellion's fight. They had secured the Cathar Nebula, but the war was far from over. The tyrants would regroup. They would come for humanity. But Sarah knew one thing: no matter what they faced, humanity would never back down. Her gaze hardened as she glanced at the remains of the destroyed flagship. This is just the beginning. The war was far from over, and the human rebellion was just getting started. But as long as humanity stood united, the tyrants would find that they were no longer the rulers of the galaxy. In the aftermath of the victory at the Cathar Nebula, the galaxy was alive with the hum of change. The tyranny of the Galactus Dominion had suffered a devastating blow, and the once unified empire of the tyrants was now unraveling at its edges. Rebel cells that had been dormant for years now burned with renewed purpose. The galaxy was waking up, and everywhere, whispers of humanity's triumph echoed like wildfire. Sarah Elston stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, her hands folded in front of her as she gazed at the map of the galaxy on the hollow screen. Her fleet had grown, as had the rebellion's reach. What started as a ragtag group of defiant humans had now become a force to be reckoned with. Yet, even with the tyrants in disarray, Sarah knew the hardest battles were still ahead. "We've secured several new systems in the last week alone," Lieutenant Harris reported, his eyes flicking to the monitors. "Fleets of allied races are joining the cause. The tyrants are losing ground. The pressure is building." Sarah nodded but didn't share his optimism. She had seen the relentless power of the tyrants firsthand. The victory at the Cathar Nebula had been a massive triumph, but it had come at a great cost. Many ships had been lost, and too many lives had been sacrificed. And though the tyrants' retreat was a clear sign of weakness, it was only a matter of time before they regrouped, their wrath even more fearsome than before. "They're not done yet," Sarah said, her voice steady. "They'll retaliate. They'll regroup and strike back harder. We need to be ready." Lieutenant Harris frowned. "You think they'll rebuild that quickly?" "They have the resources," Sarah said with a grim smile. "They're ruthless. We've shaken them, but we haven't broken them. The real war is still ahead." Days passed as Sarah continued to monitor the shifting tides of the galactic war. While their allies made headway in key sectors, the tyrants were not content to lick their wounds quietly. As Sarah had feared, they were already amassing new fleets, strengthening their hold on the remaining strongholds. The time to rest was over. The rebellion needed to strike again before the tyrants could regain their footing. The next target was a system that the tyrants had fortified with alarming speed. The planet, known as Rethar, had become one of the last symbols of their dominance, a fortress world from which they could potentially regroup and retaliate. If they could take Rethar, the rebellion could sever the heart of the tyrant's command structure. It was a bold move. Too bold, perhaps. But Sarah knew the war wouldn't wait for the perfect plan. They had to take risks now, while the tyrants were still divided. "We hit Rethar, we hit them hard," Sarah declared to the gathered officers on the bridge. "This is the beginning of the end for the tyrants. We take their last stronghold, and they'll lose their ability to control the galaxy." The crew nodded in agreement. It was a dangerous mission, but one that felt necessary. The rebellion was hungry for victory, and this was their chance to secure a major advantage. Are we ready? Sarah asked, her gaze sweeping over her officers. We're ready, Commander, Lieutenant Harris replied, his voice full of resolve. We'll move in and take the planet before they have time to react. Our fleet will act as a diversion while our ground teams strike from the surface. We can't afford any mistakes, Sarah warned. The moment we show weakness, the tyrants will use it against us. This is our shot. The officers exchanged nods of determination. The stakes had never been higher. The attack on Redhar began swiftly. The human fleet, supported by their allies, descended upon the planet in a coordinated strike. Plasma fire lit up the darkened skies, and explosions rocked the surface as the battle raged in space and on the ground. The Phoenix led the charge, with Sarah at its helm. Her heart pounded in her chest as the first wave of enemy ships emerged from Rethar's orbit, already forming defensive lines. The tyrants weren't caught off guard as they had been at Cathar, but Sarah's fleet had learned from the past. They adapted quickly, using their knowledge of the tyrants' tactics to press the attack. We're making progress. Harris called from his station. Their shields are buckling. We're pushing them back. Sarah's eyes narrowed. They were winning, but victory didn't feel close. Redhar had become a symbol for the tyrants, a prize too important to lose without a fight. This won't be over until we crush their command center, Sarah said, her voice cold and determined. We need to neutralize their leadership on the surface. With their forces diverted, a special ops team was dispatched to infiltrate the planet's heavily fortified capital. As the Phoenix engaged the remaining fleet, Sarah's most trusted operatives made their way through enemy lines. They moved swiftly, like shadows in the dark, determined to reach their target, the Tyrant High Command. Hours passed. The battle for Redhar intensified, the ground forces clashing with brutal force. Amidst the chaos, Sarah's operatives breached the High Command stronghold. It was a fast and decisive strike, targeting the heart of the Tyrant forces. Explosions rocked the facility as the High Command was decimated, and the rebellion's flag was raised above the ruins. In space, the last of the Tyrant's fleet fell. The planet was secured. Redhar was no longer a stronghold for the Tyrants, it was now the symbol of their decline. The rebellion had taken a critical step forward, but as Sarah surveyed the wreckage of the battlefield, she knew there was no turning back now. The Tyrants would not rest. Their fury would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the human fleet regrouped, Sarah stood at the bridge of the Phoenix, watching the shattered remains of the Tyrant forces. The rebellion was stronger than ever, but there was still much to do. The final victory would be hard-won, but humanity had shown they were unstoppable. The Tyrants would learn the cost of underestimating Earth. We'll be ready for them, Sarah said, her voice steady. The galaxy belongs to those who dare to fight for it. And we are just getting started. The victory at Redhar was a turning point, but it was not the end. The Tyrants, though weakened, were still a formidable enemy, and Sarah knew their retaliation would come swiftly. The rebellion had dealt a significant blow to their power structure, but it had also drawn their attention squarely to humanity. They would fight to maintain their grip on the galaxy, but Sarah had seen something in the aftermath of Redhar, something they hadn't counted on. Humanity was not simply a force of rebellion anymore, it was a symbol of defiance, a beacon for every oppressed world in the galaxy. Sarah stood at the helm of the Phoenix, her gaze fixed on the map of the galaxy. The human fleet had grown even larger since Redhar. Allies from all corners of the galaxy had joined the cause, and the Galactic Tyrants' once unstoppable empire was now fractured and divided. No longer were the rebellion's victories just small skirmishes, they were now decisive moments, propelling the rebellion closer to its ultimate goal. We've taken another system, Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice filled with relief. The Tyrants' forces are scattered. We've secured a foothold on 2 more fronts. Sarah gave him a nod, but her expression remained somber. There was no time to rest. Every victory, every inch of ground taken, only spurred the Tyrants to fight harder. They would not give up easily. We've dealt them a heavy blow, but they're not finished yet, Sarah said. They're reorganizing. I can feel it. We're ready for them, Commander, Harris replied. This time, it's different. We've proven ourselves to the galaxy. They're starting to realize they're not invincible anymore. Sarah couldn't help but agree. The tides had shifted in humanity's favor. Once considered a small, insignificant species in the vastness of the galaxy, humans had now become the symbol of resistance. Earth's people had no grand fleets, no powerful empires or ancient technologies, but they had something far more dangerous: ingenuity, willpower, and an unshakable belief that they could win, no matter the odds. In the weeks that followed, the rebellion launched coordinated strikes across multiple sectors. The Galactic Tyrants, once arrogant and unchallenged, now found themselves scrambling to defend their empire. One by one, their strongholds fell, their fleets shattered. No longer were they the unrivaled rulers of the galaxy, they were cornered predators, desperately lashing out in an attempt to salvage their crumbling empire. Then, a turning point came. The rebels discovered a vital piece of intelligence: the Tyrant Central Command Station, hidden deep within the uncharted region of the galaxy, the place where the true heart of their empire pulsed. It was a risky move to go after it, but Sarah knew that if they could eliminate the Tyrant leadership once and for all, the rest of their forces would collapse. We go in, we hit them with everything we've got, and we end it, Sarah said to her command staff, her eyes steely with determination. No more holding back. We do this or we die trying. They were ready. The human fleet was now a well-oiled machine, veterans of countless battles, each one stronger for what they had endured. Sarah had fought side by side with them, each victory and loss intertwining their fates. They were no longer just rebels, they were a force of nature, unstoppable and united in purpose. The final assault was launched at the heart of the Tyrant Empire. The journey was perilous, every ship in the fleet faced the relentless threat of enemy forces, trying to slow their advance. But humanity's determination was unmatched. As they approached the Tyrant's command station, the skies above seemed to darken with the fury of the final battle. It was a desperate fight, an all-or-nothing gamble. The Tyrants had amassed their greatest forces to defend the station, but Sarah's fleet was relentless, crashing through their defenses with ferocity. Ships were lost. Friends fell. But the human forces held their ground, pressing onward, undeterred. Finally, Sarah and her team reached the heart of the station, where the Tyrant leadership awaited, preparing for their last stand. The air was thick with tension as Sarah and her most trusted operatives stormed the control room. The Tyrant leaders were gathered in their final fortress, but this time, there would be no escape. The rebels had come for them. End it, Sarah said to her team. We don't give them another chance to rise again. With swift, precise strikes, the Tyrants were defeated. The control station fell, its leaders dead or captured. The galaxy watched as the last remnants of the galactic dominion crumbled into dust. The battle was over. The Tyrants had been vanquished. The galaxy, once shackled by fear and oppression, was free. But for Sarah, there was no sense of euphoria, only the quiet satisfaction that they had fought and won. The rebellion had done the impossible, had defied the odds and changed the fate of the universe. But the real work was just beginning. A new era was dawning. The human fleet gathered together in the wake of their victory, their ships floating in the darkness of space like stars waiting to be reborn. For the first time in ages, the galaxy felt like it was truly free. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, her gaze softening as she looked out into the stars. This is just the beginning, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. The galaxy is ours to rebuild. Humanity had proved the power of a determined few. And they had forged a new future, one where no tyrant could ever rule again. The war was over. The tyrants had fallen. And humanity, against all odds, had taken its place among the stars.